Hello everyone, welcome back to another Tahmid Talks video. We're gonna talk about a topic that's close to everyone's soul. It's grocery shopping, and if you have been grocery shopping lately, you know that it's a pain in the wallet every time. And this pain in the wallet has a lot of Canadians really angry. You might have seen the recent rounds of newspaper headlines about the $40 chicken breast at Loblaws, and it was like 5 pieces of chicken breast in a small pack, nothing, grand, and $40 for like 5 pieces had the internet raging. So if you don't read newspapers, you would have definitely seen the memes on this one. And this sort of proliferated to the media, beyond their social media, to the traditional, yes, boomer stuff, the traditional media, and then beyond. And there was public discourse, a lot of it about what's causing this. Is it greedflation? Is it those greedy multi-billion-dollar CEOs and owning families of the grocery stores here? Or was it some conspiracy of some food cartel globally or locally, nationally at least, that was manipulating our food prices? So today in this episode, we're going to get to the bottom of the skyrocketing food prices in Canada, taking an objective look at what's happening. So to start off, generally food prices in Canada are higher compared to many other countries. It's even worse if you live in the Arctic, up in Nunavut or whatever the territories, the subarctic to be more accurate, or any other place where it's hard to get food, maybe out in the East Coast on remote islands. And this is due to a number of factors why food prices is so high in Canada. It is a small and dispersed population and a large land body at the same time, not to mention a history of tariffs on imported foods, which was made out, to protect the local industries and whatnot, but sometimes that can backfire and it isn't always the best for consumers at home. And of course, government regulation that go hand in hand, which add to the cost of producing and distributing food here. Additionally, when the Canadian dollar is strong and the cost of doing business as Canada is higher, grocery prices also tend to go up in those times, although recently Canadian dollar has been more like monopoly money and it's not that strong right now anyways. So while Canada does have a pretty strong agricultural sector still and quite a fair bit of domestic production, you may have seen those Ontario dairy farmer ads, or the PEI potatoes, that's another of my favorite. Those ads show you that, there's robust production domestically, but it's still not enough to meet the demand for certain products, especially given the number of people who come to Canada every year, as well as natural population growth, and it's worse off in places where there is an imbalance between the supply and demand, where the land doesn't grow as much, right, or it's colder for a longer period. Now, one of the logical explanations some people might go to is similar to our telecommunication industries, the evil big Bell, Rogers, and Telus who dominate pricing and artificially create scarcity and high prices. Does that happen in the grocery chains and stores as well? Well, it depends to some degree because, let's be honest, we shop at grocery stores and there's a lot of names and labels, but it's the same owners. So if you didn't know, for example, Loblaw, which received a lot of heat recently, they also own the banners of No Frills. They own Real Canadian Stores and Zehrs. So if you're shopping at those, you're really shopping at Loblaw. Then their big competitor Sobeys, which is owned by Empire Company Limited, they operate under other banners such as Sobeys, IGA, Freshco, and Thrifty Food. Once again, same owner, but different price points and target customer. Then third, you have another big name, Metro, which is a Quebec-based grocery store chain. They operate under Metro and Food Basics. Last but not least in the mix, you have Walmart, which has its own in-house brands, but not other banners that it operates stores under. So to be honest, like many other industries in Canada, a large chunk of the grocery business is 3 or 4 big companies, and that's a very common thing in Canada. So, however, the caveat here is if you live in big cities like me, shout outs to Toronto and everyone there, you'll notice that there's a lot of competition from these sort of ethnic and other specialty food grocers. Shout outs to all the Chinese, Indians, Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, Persians, and whatever, running their own grocery shops and specialty foods. Where else are you gonna get halal meats, right? So that creates a degree of competition in the bigger cities, but if you've traveled across Canada, you'll notice that when you go to the smaller towns or even villages, you're screwed because, God knows IGA is the only grocery store in town where there's like only one food basics for 55 kilometers, and that's real bad. So the lack of choice and control over the supply chain definitely plays into the higher food prices we're paying in Canada, but that's not it. In recent years, the food price inflation has just not been a solely Canadian issue. It's been a lot of places around the world. As you may have noticed, there's this thing called climate change, and weather patterns are changing, and we're getting a lot more extreme weather events which can disrupt food production and lead to price increases. On the other hand, you're getting a lot of droughts and flooding that destroy crop yields and once again lead to higher food prices. On a similar note, there's pests and pestilences going around, everything from avian flu and so on and so forth, that destroy crop and domesticated animals. Then the big one that everyone blames for everything these days, the supply chain disruption. So COVID-19 did definitely disrupt supply chain in many ways, and the food and agriculture industry wasn't immune, right? Then another huge culprit was the gas cost, the fuel cost, and food needs to be transported, especially if you want your goods from, Mexico, Salvador, and to put them on trucks, it costs a lot. Trucks are huge, they consume a lot of fuel, and that fuel bill isn't cheap to transport your food. But now let's pinpoint to the actual grocery stores, and there was a lot of blame on them misusing their sort of, anti-competitive pricing powers. And the truth is, grocery business is a pretty rough business. The margins, although it varies greatly depending on what you're selling, what type of store you are, and the cost, but grocery stores have generally low margins, especially for, the staples like milk and bread. These products are in high demand and there's a lot of competition for market share. On the other hand, specialty products such as organic and free range, which is what Loblaw claims those chicken breasts were, that's why it's $40. Who knows who's buying them, but it could be the same people buying multi-million-dollar homes in Toronto, right? But in general, grocery margins, after all those expenses, labor, rent, utilities, and marketing, tend to fluctuate in the 2 to 5% range, which is not very much, and it's definitely not as high as the software or tech business, right? And there's this very good CBC article, which I'll link with some other resources in the description below. Talking about the description, make sure to leave a comment down below too about what you think on this issue. I look forward to reading your comments, and as always, hit the subscribe button and hit the thumbs up. So getting back to the topic at hand, what I was saying is there's a good CBC expose which sort of goes into the issue of greedflation and have some expert look at the books of accounting for these corporations. So what we see is in recent times, their sales are at almost all-time highs, which is interesting given all the issues with supply chain and whatnot. But at the same time, part of that is probably attributable to people staying at home more. People's habits have changed and hence buying more groceries. At the same time, the margins have relatively stayed stagnant, and the CEO of Loblaw will happily point that out and be like, look, we're not at fault here. And the other issue with accounting is these companies bundle a lot of their sales together from different units. So we don't know which specific item or which specific unit. For all we know, it could be cosmetics, that's attributable to most of the increasing sales, or pharmacy, drugs, and whatnot. So to say directly that it's from food prices going up that they're making record sales may not be directly the whole story. So the issue here is we don't know for sure because there isn't enough transparency in how numbers are recorded and then how they're presented to the public, even though these are publicly traded companies. There's often a lot of, mystery and shrouds in their accounting. But at the end of the day, the average person with inflation in food prices and fuel prices is hurting, or at least their wallets are. And a lot of people will have to turn to help. They'll have to turn to food banks and other measures. And if the situation isn't as dire, people can always rely on the old school methods, the frugality methods of couponing, of taking the discount flyers all the time and looking at it first to cut costs. Otherwise, we'll probably have to deal with these issues of grocery inflation and shop more at the discount grocers, the likes of No Frills, although sometimes the produce, the fresh goods there aren't as good, but the processed and the canned food, right, shouldn't be too bad. But it's understandable as to why this issue is so heated and why so many people have chimed in and why so many people are angry, and they have a right to be angry. And in some respects in Canada, food inflation has been a little bit more under control compared to parts of Europe where it's massive double-digit inflation in average food prices. But let's hope it stays that way, or even better, the food prices start coming down from where they were as we cloud of the pandemic, where supply chain disruptions isn't as big, or at least a big of an issue anymore. But food prices always will be volatile, especially with climate change and other macro issues. So yes, happy or sad grocery shopping to all of you. I hope you're able to, bring down some of those costs in these difficult times and have a look. And hopefully step back and take an objective look at the issues that caused us to be in this position right now, and hopefully things will get better. This is Tahmid signing out.